I am so pleased to have my dear friend, Debra Kaplan, participating in this. She joined us a while back, but she has a new book. And so we begged her to come back, and she did. And so this one is on her new book, Coupleship Incorporated: From Financial Conflict to Financial Intimacy. Compelling topic, right? Stuff that we don't talk about, sex and money. Oh my goodness. So she did a podcast with Dr. Rob. So on the Seeking Integrity site, you'll find that under the Sex, Love, and Addiction podcast series. So, but stay tuned. So I'm going to turn it over to Debra. She's going to tell you why she wrote the book and a little bit about herself and her background. But we're going to answer questions after her presentation.
Thanks, Tammy. It's wonderful to be here and wonderful to be with the Seeking Integrity community. I had a lot of fun. Rob and we had a lot of fun doing the podcast. I think we actually turned it into a 2-part podcast, which was fantastic. And so for those who are not familiar with the I guess the topic of money, because it hits all of our lives. There's no way to get out of life without having some connection to, issue with, or interaction with money. And as a therapist, I'm a licensed therapist. I'm here in Arizona, and I work across the world in consultation with those who seek some help and support with their relationship and money. And one of the topics that always came up in my work with clients was money. My first book was For Love and Money: Exploring Sexual and Financial Betrayal in Relationships, and wherein relationships had a financial and most importantly, sexual betrayal going on. And the next book came as a result of couples saying, but Deb, what about us, the relationships where there's no addiction involved in the process in our relationship, and yet there's a lot of issues around money and power and dynamics between us. And so that became the second book, Battle of the Titans: Mastering the Forces of Sex, Money, and Power in Relationships. And through all this time, there have been many couples who argue about money, have financial conflict, and have said that if we could get aligned around money, our lives, our relationship would be great, because if it were not for money, we get along and we never argue. And so what I decided was to write a book, because the notion that came to me was that couples are not only in a romantic relationship, but this is a financial one as well. And I partnered with a colleague friend of mine, Richard Kaler, who is a financial planner. And from 2 perspectives, we brought together our skills and our lifelong experience around money to write Coupleship Inc. And it also has a internal family systems, IFS, parts work. So there's a part of me that wants to work on this issue, and there's a part of me that doesn't. And there's a part of me who wants to buy a pair of shoes, and there's a part of me that knows my partner's going to get very upset with me if I spend money and buy one more thing. And so from a perspective of parts and couples, we wrote that book together. And so I want to start today, and I'm going to share screen here. I wanted to start our presentation today with the knowledge, that is not where I want to start us. Please hold, please. There we go. I wanted to start with the notion that couples often say, I think we fight about money because we don't know how to talk about it. Yeah, that's very true. Couples really don't have a good awareness and a skill set to talk about money. And this is the cover of the book that Rick and I got together and wrote, Coupleship Inc. And we are very, very proud of the book. And we have gotten some amazing feedback about it, those in the professional world and those people who have now bought it and enjoyed it and are working from it. And so for your consideration, I'd like you to ponder that many of us do not come into a coupleship with experience or tools for talking about money. How many of us, think about those of you who are listening, what did you learn about money? Did anyone actually teach you? Did you have any knowledge about it? Or was it modeled because of what you saw your parents, your family, and others in your life, what their behaviors and their beliefs were? Consider that when money is discussed in a coupleship, it often involves a problem or a disagreement. Now, My family, growing up, my parents were married for 50 years. And throughout the duration of that marriage, while it was not perfect, it was a very good marriage, their arguments were always about money. It was not really about anything else other than my father was very anxious about money. My mom didn't want to have anything to do with it. And that became a problem because when my dad passed away, she certainly had to become aware of money, but he always enforced and he really implored her to say, hey, get involved with this money. And she wanted no part of it until a knockdown, drag out, as I am told, fight. And my mother said, fine, if it makes you happy, I'll pay the bills. And my father yelled, apparently, that is all I've ever wanted for you to do, is to take the responsibility. And so my mother's avoidance around the money was really what was at the heart of that, her unwillingness. So they got together. She now paid the bills from that point on. And she also became a wage earner. She went back to school and became a teacher and began contributing to the family as well. Partners who have little skill in discussing money end up in arguments rather than constructive conversations. And that's because they don't know what skills or what it is that is driving the emotions around the money. Another aspect that Rick and I really felt was important is that this book would come with exercises and skills that you could do the work yourself if you didn't have access to resources or you did not have access to a financial partner, help, or a professional or a therapist. So a romantic relationship is, as I said, one of the most important emotional decisions we make in our lifetime, but it is also one of the most important financial decisions of our lives. And couples don't always actually think that way. Love is Blind is a program that Rick, my co-author, would say to me, I was watching Love is Blind, and I said, I've never actually seen it. Well, I can actually say I saw it recently. And in any of those it's of course, reality TV, but none of the couples who are in this speed dating type of environment, none of them are talking about money. It's not romantic. It's not the kind of thing one talks about when you get together. And yet they're assessing their other as a potential life partner. And money is the most, if not the most integral decision aspect that goes into a decision, because as research has played out, money is the greatest predictor for relational discord and divorce. And therefore, it really is a topic that belongs on the table for discussion and is rarely a part of the conversation. From The Knot, a financial survey in 2022 that says men and women, now this is binary, men and women reported feeling very confident in their ability to make smart financial decisions. Men more than women. Some of this is cultural. Some of this is family. That men were 50% of the time versus women for 42% of the time were willing and believing that they were confident to find a career that would make them happy. And that 38% of men and 33% of women keep financial stress and anxiety in check. And maybe that is true, but for that cohort, that was part of the survey. And I think, though, it does speak to a big disparity among men and women when we're talking in that gender binary. Men and women tend to have a very different experience with money and about money. And again, family, culture, generation, all of these factors go into how a relationship will work with money. So growing up in our families of origin, the family in which we were raised, I want you to now consider your own relationship if you're watching this webinar and or someone who you know and are close with. If you're contemplating a relationship with someone, think about what are the beliefs, the conscious and unconscious drivers that are part of our belief system and our behavior system. And to the degree that these beliefs, which we call money scripts, are rooted in childhood. Now, the term money script was coined by Rick Kaler and Brad and Ted Klontz many years ago, and it is part of a very spoken vernacular to describe what are our organizing narratives, the scripts that many of us may play in our head either silently or outwardly. We may say to someone in a relationship, I don't believe that spending money is important. I believe more that it's important to save, not to spend. Those are the kind of scripts that we may hear ourselves say or hear our partners say. In the realm of money scripts tend to fall into 4 categories. And I'd like you to consider that if you are in a relationship and you tend to argue about money or have disconnect around money or can't seem to agree on retirement or how much we spend or where we'll live or how many children we want to have, think of the general categories that money scripts have been broken down into: avoidance, worship, status, and vigilance. So for example, avoidance speaks to the fact that a person would rather not kind of avoid, they'd rather not want to deal with money. It's not an aversion, it's not that strong, but it is more like kind of along the lines of my mother, where she's like, I don't want to pay the bills, you pay the bills, I don't want to know about this. And as I say to my clients, and I say to couples all the time, hope is not a backup plan. And that to not know about money situation, I say this to betrayed partners all the time, that in their relationship, when they're choosing, this is not about I wasn't told or I was lied to or I was deceived. We're not addressing that yet. But if it's from the perspective of, yeah, I don't really need to know about the money, or my partner can do it all and they'll take care of things and I don't need to know, I'm busy doing this over here while my partner's busy doing this over there. Avoidance is not necessarily a healthy approach. And so a money script might be others should make the decisions about money, or I don't know enough to make the decisions about money, which is a justification. On another aspect of money scripts, money worship. More money will make me happier and money would solve all of my problems. People who money worship have a strong connection to the fact that money is a very important aspect of their life. It is the end all and be all. I don't get a job that I enjoy. I get a job that'll make me a lot of money. And so the emphasis is on the payout, not the everyday. And what I often tell my own children, my now adult grown children, is when they were looking at school and they were looking at where they wanted to be in their life, I say to them, do not look for what you want to earn, look for what you enjoy doing and the money will follow. Because if you love what you do, you will never work another day in your life. And what that means is that whatever one does as a pursuit, it will never feel like work. It will be a passion. I love what I do. Tammy and I have known each other for years as a therapist, as an author, as a speaker, and I know Tammy through the realm of the addiction world. And we both are very passionate about what we do. And I wouldn't speak for you, Tammy, but I would imagine that you would say you absolutely love what you do and it does not feel like a chore. It's a passion. Status, money status, for example. The more money you have, the more respect you will have. This person overemphasizes. It's similar to worship, but the person with money status truly sees their self-worth as their net worth. And I'm only as good as my net worth is, which means I better make more money. And if I don't make the money, I have to at least show that I have the money. So there's an overemphasis of what people see, and that can be a very addictive, compulsive process. Money status, the more money you have, the more respect you will have. So think in terms of addiction, think in terms of the pursuit of more, because one is not enough, 1,000 is not good either. And that in compulsive behaviors, that seeking, because I'm not happy with who I am. And so something external of myself will make me happy. And in this case, we're talking about money. It could be a job, it could be access to fame or fortune. And for addiction, it's whatever the drug of choice is, a relationship, work, drugs, alcohol, really doesn't matter. It fills the void. And so the status underneath this money script is a lot of shame and is a lot of self-worth and self-esteem issues. And last on the 4 categories, vigilance. Money should be saved, not spent. So this person is much more hyper-focused on safety. Consider a relationship where there's an argument about, I want to go on a vacation and I think we should save. You may be working with someone who's got a strong vigilance around, I'm afraid to spend money because I may not have it. And for that person to consider, where'd they come from? What's the family in which they were raised? What was life like that they learned about having less, a little, or a lot of money, or a divorce, or a financial emergency that may have happened in their life wherein they did not actually feel safe, and that they never knew where their next job would come from, or their meal, or what would happen next in their life. Would they stay where they were living? Would they have to move? And this is not about a military move. This is about financial insecurity. So that creates the vigilance later on. And there's a great exercise that we include in the book, and I'll just give you an example. The exercise is meant to uncover what your known and unknown core beliefs about money, work, and relationships may be. So it's an interesting exercise. And just for a second, I'm going to show you 3 columns of words, of which we have balance and anger. We have the word debt, children, enough. We have deprivation, retirement, marriage, budget, self-worth. The point of this exercise is to look at these words and, without really giving a lot of thought, write down and start noting what some beliefs and thoughts are about money or about these words. So, for example, I feel inferior to my wife. She makes more than I do. These are some examples of money scripts and beliefs that people have. My partner does not understand money. I hide money for protection. When I need help, my family is not there for me. I'm embarrassed to tell people how successful I am. Some other writings are, I feel insecure about money. My self-worth is tied to my net worth. There you go. That's literally off the page. I must be sexual as my contribution to the family, as provocative as that statement may be. There are partners who feel, whether you are anywhere on the spectrum of female to male or other, that my contribution, my currency in this relationship is not money, and therefore I have to do X to contribute. It is not necessarily a given, it's a belief, an internal belief. I am disloyal if I talk about money in the family. So all of these writings that some folks have written are about their internal beliefs and therefore behaviors that bring discord or conflict about money into their relationship. One of the more fun aspects of the book that I wanted to include, and I was really adamant about, talk about working in a relationship and in a partnership. Rick and I did not agree at all. And he was thinking, no, I don't want to include anything about behavioral and cognitive biases. It's boring. It's all about economics. Why would you want to put this in the book? And I'm like, I'm telling you, Rick, I deal with this every day in my office. And he's like, no, I don't want to deal with it. Well, we did include it. We included it because we were at a conference, and every single presentation in that conference spoke to one degree or another about cognitive biases. And I held my mouth when I saw him at the end of the conference, and I said, okay, I'm not going to say the words that are on the tip of my tongue, which every single one of you listening probably knows what those words are. And he smiled and he said, okay, I'll give it a try. Well, I have to tell you that I was amazed, but really pleased that when we put it into the book, it is one of the areas that gets the most attention. And recently on a podcast that we did together, the interviewer asked, what are your favorite parts of the book? And I actually didn't anticipate the question out of all the questions we prepared for. And Rick said, well, I have to be honest, at the risk of getting Deb's, I'll never live this down, he said cognitive biases. And I was actually shocked, not because I was right. It wasn't about that, because he understood and really recognized how rich our cognitive biases are, and how much they pervade in our lives, and how much they really do consciously and unconsciously influence our beliefs and behaviors. So what are biases? It's a process whereby individuals, and I have a spelling edit here, whereby individuals do not always act rationally nor consider all available information when making a decision, but we may think we have all the information. So the biases can be cognitive, emotional, individual, or collective. So I wanted to talk about a few of them because I think that as you all listening are going to think about your own and reflect upon your own relationship, consider what cognitive biases you may have in this way. So cognitive biases are easier to correct for because they stem from faulty reasoning rather than an emotional predisposition. And I'm going to repeat that. What I think is true, or what I believe is true, is going to be easier to correct because it's driven by faulty reasoning. If I'm going to be, if I'm going to find that my thinking is incorrect or faulty, and I'm going to be corrected with evidence, then I'm going to have an easier time correcting my false belief or my cognitive bias than if it were emotionally driven, because emotions are very strong. And when we are acting on emotion, we are not always using our higher thinking brain, the cortex of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which gives us more, would I say, reason. And it's the brake of the brain versus being on the gas pedal. Emotional biases, therefore, are harder to correct for because they are based on how we feel. And we may double down on how we feel, but feelings are not fact. So what are your cognitive biases? And I happen to love Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny because they both operate in their ongoing battle with each other. If I were to actually write some cognitive biases for them, Daffy Duck is eternally optimistic that he can outflank Bugs Bunny, and Bugs Bunny is eternally optimistic, and actually he usually comes out as the victor here, where he's able to defeat Daffy Duck. So let's look at one of the biases, confirmation bias. This is the tendency to look for what confirms our belief and to ignore what contradicts our beliefs while disregarding the truth. So think of or reflect upon a relationship you know, or a coupleship that you are aware of, or your own, wherein one of the partners says, I'm going to invest in Bitcoin. I'm going to invest in cryptocurrency. And I know that I'm going to make a lot of money because I know that there is no way it's going to fail. Well, we know the history of this now. We have enough evidence to know that what goes up at some point must come down. But it is best to accept in a confirmation bias, it is best to accept the fact that this bias exists. So to say one should not have a confirmation bias is not going to be productive in your own sense and in your partner. So to counter the natural bias toward confirmation bias, because it's a very strong one, we can recognize this and be curious about opposing views. So partner A says to partner B, partner A says, I know if I invest in Bitcoin, I know I'm going to make a lot of money. And partner B says, how do you know this? And partner A goes, because I just know it in my knower. And I believe, and I'm looking at where it has gone, and I see the prices of Bitcoin, or I see the prices of crypto. And partner B says, well, you're looking for the evidence to confirm what you want to be true. And this can be a huge battleground for couples, but recognize that we are most often very naturally prone to a confirmation bias because it asserts our belief. All right, optimism bias. Some of us are naturally optimistic and some of us are not. Glass half full, glass half empty. Optimism bias leads a person to believe that they themselves are less likely to experience a negative event. This is also known as unrealistic optimism or comparative optimism. Investing in the stock market, for example, that I'm going to invest in ABC stock, and that while I think others don't invest well, the belief for this optimism is it'll be okay for me and we will make money because I'm good at what I do. Well, I will tell you that COVID was a unilateral, it was just across the board, let everyone know just how susceptible to negative events we are. I mean, with the stroke of a day or two, the world came to a halt, and that was a negative event that no one saw coming. And it was particularly difficult for those who did not plan for a rainy day. It was particularly difficult for those who did not have savings, because literally overnight, one wasn't at times, and some people forfeited well in COVID, but at times, most people found themselves either unable to do the job they love much or to go to work. So the tendency for optimism has to be matched with our also awareness that there are negative events that take place in the world. Okay, so and it might also be unrealistic, the overly optimistic. We're going to get to that in a minute. Loss aversion, the tendency to go to great lengths to avoid possible losses. And this is very strong in some people. There is an example of a very, very famous plane crash that had to do with the KLM pilot that was unwilling to take orders and did not want to go on a ground stop because he would lose the flight. The flight crew would have to get off, nobody on the plane would be able to fly, and they'd have to cancel the flight. And to avoid that loss, the pilot overrode any descent and decided to take off to, catastrophic measures. So let's talk about, in relationship, what loss aversion, optimism, and overconfidence really means. So overconfidence, when we have overconfidence, people tend to be optimistic about their outcome, but also overly confident. Being optimistic is fine, but being overly confident skews what the outcome may be. In loss aversion, people overweigh their negative events versus positive events. In other words, I'd rather not invest, or I'd rather, honey, that we don't buy this real estate because I'm so afraid of losing money on it, or I'm so afraid of the property value going down, because that's what I'm loss averse. Versus the partner who says, well, honey, if we invest in this, it's an opportunity for the future. Of course, it'll go down at some point, but over time, we're going to make money on this investment. But the aversion to loss is so strong in people in this way that they're unwilling, and they only see the negative versus the positives. And that can be just also in a job, moving cities, how many children we have, changing houses, or in any kind of relationship. The interesting thing about loss aversion and being overly confident, they pull from the very core center of a relationship. Two people who are coming at this from opposite ends are going to really be pulling in opposite directions. And that's going to be very difficult in the relationship. And so you say, well, what do we do? What's one to do, Deb? Understand from where you come, the position from which you are starting. Doesn't make your position right. It doesn't make it correct. It just means that you can begin to understand yourself and begin to understand the part of you and the part of your partner that is fighting for your position, and that you get to really have a collaborative conversation to begin to see where the conflict is fueled and how can we align together to allay fear, or to work together toward mitigating some of the fears that the person who is most loss averse can lean into. So I'm going to skip this slide because I think it's a helpful slide, but it reiterates what we just said. And then choice paralysis. Too many choices, you can't make any decision. Think about the little one who goes for a Halloween costume and goes to the board of, I think it's Party City. And this reminds me of my children when they were young. They'd go to this huge wall of choices, and my son couldn't possibly make a choice. And I didn't realize the choice paralysis bias was at play there. But what I did was I took one and I took another, and I said, from the two cards, would you like, this costume or this costume? Make the choice between two. And so with choice paralysis, people have a hard time. They really cannot make a decision. And in couples where this is active, what we tell people is to bring the choice down to one or two and begin from that place. All right. In our book, we talk very much about the 3-circle diagram for financial health. And anyone in recovery knows the 3 circles. The inner circle is what we do when we are active in our addictions. But in financial health or financial dysfunction, let's look at the inner circle, keeping financial secrets, enabling others financially, risky investments, and gambling. So those were all examples of what unhealthy behavior would include. The middle circle, which is the slippery slope behavior, what I do that may get me in trouble, what I do that may get me into an addictive or compulsive behavior or back in addiction. We have filling online carts, in other words, going onto websites and just filling those carts, which is slippery behavior because they're sitting there pinging like, buy me, buy me, buy me. Keeping cash in a wallet, overworking, not taking care of oneself, or rescuing with money and shopping to self-medicate. And being in halt, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. What do we do when we are in financial health, the outside circle? What are we doing to take care of ourselves? We're attending Debtors Anonymous, maintaining a budget. We'll have maintained financial independence and not be enabled and dependent upon others. We will employ the 12 steps and step 10 in particular, taking daily inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Keeping a financial journal, exercise, meditation. These are all examples of ways to maintain and identify financial health. Some of the financial groups that are very helpful for 12-step groups that are very helpful for money. Alcoholics Anonymous, yes, because alcohol and dysregulation and inability to function from a healthy place. Workaholics Anonymous, Debtors Anonymous, Spenders Anonymous, Under Earners Anonymous, and all of these programs are available online now. That is another wonderful side effect of COVID, that fellowships that were not available physically in person are now available across the world. Adult Children of Alcoholics, Al-Anon, CODA, Recovering Couples Anonymous, and Under Earners Anonymous, because it can go two ways in both sides of the relationship. And that's our presentation, our very quick webinar today. So questions?
Why don't you stop share on the screen so that you come back on?
Very cool.
And we do have a question too, but you know, I love that you said hope is not a backup plan. I underlined that. I took notes and I have things highlighted, but I thought, wow, like so many people go, well, I hope that's going to work out, or I'm just going to, you know, continue on despite probably massive red flags of, you know, things showing up along the way, but I'm just going to hope that it's all going to work out, you know?
Right. Because it takes into consideration that I'm going to avoid doing whatever I need to do to empower myself, but instead push the bucket down the road, whatever you want to say, and hope, put the outcome into something else's hands. Now, the Serenity Prayer says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And knowing the difference between what I can empower myself with and what I can let go of is very important. But if I now know what I can do to empower myself and choose not to or avoid it, well, that's like saying, well, better hope it works out, but I'm not taking measures.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I always say I can control my actions and reactions, and that's kind of it. And actions, you gave some concrete things, you know, that we can do to look at this and be aware. It broke my heart when I read when you said I must be sexual as a contributor to the family, but I thought I know how this plays out. I hear that, and I hear, you know, often
how do you hear that? Because
I hear it with addicts, or I hear it from betrayed partners where they, you know, the addict is demanding this, like they are the financial resource in the family, and therefore you owe me, you know, you need to take care of the household, but you need to be sexual with me, you know, on demand. But I thought, wow, to have that be a core belief of, you know, but I could see how that would transition, you know, if you are
yes,
hearing that message repetitively.
I've worked with many individuals who are not a betrayed partner. They don't recognize, though, even though that there isn't infidelity, sexual infidelity in their marriage, what they are not aware of is that in that implicit belief that my partner is making the money. And so what am I contributing? I don't believe that I'm valued because they themselves aren't valuing their own contribution or what they bring to the relationship. And if that's the case, and instead look at, well, what would my partner value? That my partner seems to say that I need to be sexual, or I'm not sexual enough. Well, what I tell the individual is that's a rationalization. That is no healthier than the alcoholic who says, I drink because you drive me to drink, right? One is no healthier than the other. It's a justification. The person drinks because they have an alcohol problem. The person who demands some sort of sexual behavior because this would be good for us, that's coercion. And at worst, it's abuse. But to not see, for the partner to pull away and say, wait a second, is this within my value system? Is this what I want to bring to the relationship? And if I am, what I'm bringing is not valued, why? And let's have that conversation.
I thought it was, I was thinking when you're looking at core beliefs, and I thought, well, my grandparents came out of the Depression, and their influence on my parents, and how, I mean, like I can see it generationally of how, how the finances and what I inherited, from them. I thought it was really interesting, even at the beginning when you were talking about, the male and female, like how we approach money, how we, how secure we are in our financial abilities. I thought that was really interesting, that there's still such a gap, between the sexes.
I want to pick up on something you just said. Intergenerational trauma is not necessarily the same as financial trauma, but can create financial trauma. My dad, his family was not well off, but they had enough. But I don't believe that he felt like they had enough. And so he grew up insecure with money. When he married my mom and they had a family, he provided for us and he provided well, but he had such an insecurity that I never understood why as a young adult. And that goes to the heart of some of the enmeshment there. But as a young adult and then an adult on my own, he would repeat to me, okay, we have this much in this account. And if anything happens, I want you to know we have this much in this account. And I would say, Dad, why are you telling me this? We just had this conversation. Like, I don't need to hear it. Because I didn't realize that his insecurity was so strong, and his anxiety and his need to have some sort of control over knowing what the money was, that it bled into, I want you now to know. And it bled into how little he wanted my mother to spend. Even when she became a wage earner and contributed to the house. And that was their conflict. We're spending too much.
And she's like, but I'm earning my own money.
Yes.
So,
yes. Exactly.
So one of the questions I had, like when you had the egg with, overconfidence and loss aversion, I'm like, oh my gosh, polar opposites. And I could see, the loss avoidant just getting so fearful of, oh my goodness, we're overspending. And the other one going, what? Like, we've got to take some risks to make money, and it's all going to work out. Like, and having, how often, I know that money is a huge conflict for couples. And I could see, if you have two avoidants, they're probably happy because they're not spending any money. But if you've got two overspenders, they're financially insecure, because they're spending all over the place. So there's probably a lot of couples where it's the balance of the two, but that's also the conflict. So I'm thinking that there's probably an attraction to somebody who's different than you, but it's also that. Ugh.
My God, that's very well said. It's the balance, but it's also the conflict. Yeah, we are often drawn to the person who has what we do not. And I don't mean toys. I mean personality and character. And that if I am a spender and I believe in abundance And I have very little financial insecurity. And I believe that there's plenty to go around because I didn't grow up with any insecurity, and I spend. And I come together with you, Tammy, and you're saying, no, we can't spend. The real goal here is for both of us to sit down and for you to hear the part of me that believes in the abundance. Now, if I'm being reckless, that's another conversation.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm spending beyond our means, that's another conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But if my perspective is such that there's plenty to go around, we have enough, and money is meant to enjoy, because that's my script, perhaps, then the conversation for us is for you to hear where I'm coming from, the part of me that believes there's abundance. Most importantly, because your insecurity or reluctance to spend, I have to listen very intently to what your fear is. Because if I'm trying to pull you along into my belief system and say, come on, I'm telling you, I'm right. Like, we're going to be fine. How many partners say to the other, don't worry about it, it'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the anxiety goes through the board, through the roof, because that doesn't help someone feel better. It just actually dismisses their anxiety. And so for me to listen to you and hear you say, I'm afraid. There's a part of me that maybe knows we have enough, but I'm just too afraid. And that I'm able to really address and speak to and attend to your need so that your anxiety comes down. Because in the end of the day, our relationship is we have each other's back, and we are in the foxhole together because I have your back and you have mine.
Well, and I was thinking, so you go on this great vacation and the anxious person is going, oh my God, we're spending so much money. And the other person's going, this is great. Like,
how often that happens every day. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say the experience that you're hoping for isn't so having that conversation and getting to that mutual place, is so beneficial. We have questions. One other thing, I was like, I didn't remember. I knew that there was Spenders Anonymous, but I don't think I knew that there was Under Earners Anonymous. So interesting. And I thought, I wonder how many people need to go to both, where they're spending.
Under Earners, by the way, is a phenomenal 12-step fellowship because they talk about insufficiency of self. The I'm not good enoughness that DA speaks to, but the Under Earners Anonymous is the person who gets into careers or jobs or situations financially where they don't value themselves. And it speaks to different, there's a beautiful overlap with DA, and DA is a great 12-step fellowship as well. But yeah, Under Earners is a phenomenal, why we under earn, we undervalue our own worth.
Oh, interesting. Okay, we're going to go to questions. So the first one, and you should be able to pull up the Q&A at the bottom of the screen too, to follow along. So the first one is, what are specific things I can put into practice as an addict in recovery who has had power and control over my wife when it comes to finances? I have given her access to the accounts she wants access to, but what other practices could I implement? I think that's a great question, looking for how to make progress.
That actually is a really good question. Given the degree to which the person addict in recovery, given what the behavior in addiction was like, again, because this is on very general terms, we don't have that information, but how much betrayal, what the nature of the behaviors were when active in addiction goes a long way to knowing how long it will take for a partner should the partner decide to trust, because trust is earned. And so I think sometimes addicts get into the place of I'm doing everything I can and nothing's changed because they're looking for an immediate quid pro quo. I'm now doing this, so you have to do or think that. And it isn't the way life works, because trust was broken or behavior was denied. My concerns as a partner may have been denied over and over and over again, or broken promises that addiction often has. It's built on broken promises, both for the addict, the promise that I'll feel better with this next hit, or for the addict's thinking of, I promise you I'll never do this again. So for the person who's asking the question and for others, giving access, proving consistency, showing up time and again may or may not reap the rewards of trust, because there's no proven outcome. But I also think going about it, asking from the perspective of what am I doing today to show I'm trustworthy, that my behavior is trustworthy, is a much more fruitful pursuit than what can I do to change someone else's perspective.
I love that. And, I'm thinking, I love that you're sharing access. I think I would ask your partner what, what would be valued is having a conversation and not you doing the financial report, but, answering any questions, sharing conversations about, the finances to me would be valuable because it would be, more transparency, not just I'm looking online and can see things, but having that conversation so it feels like we're coming together. I talked about the egg and the gap, and it's like,
Mhm.
to me, anything that closes the gap, on relationships and builds trust is a helpful, beneficial thing. So
That's a beautiful point, Tammy. I want to add to that for a second. I think what I'm hearing you say is, yes, there are specifics we can do, but it's also about building the trust and speaking together, collaborating and having the conversation. And I also think there's a point that neither of us have yet said, which is acknowledging the pain I have
mm,
caused you.
mhm.
That's not just taking accountability, that's speaking to the pain that the other person has experienced by our own hand, and to acknowledge and validate that I have hurt you. And that takes time, because I could say, like, I'm sorry I hurt you, but that
Mhm.
doesn't really register. It doesn't land because it's not heartfelt. And so I'm coming from a place of empathy of saying, I'm truly noting and I am sorry for what I have done to you.
Well, and to rebalancing the, because you said you had power and control. So to shuffle that to make sure that it's a partnership, that the two of you, are in this together, to
Yeah.
me would be a meaningful step.
And I would certainly say read Battle of the Titans, because that is about sex, money, and power in relationship, and rebalancing an imbalance of power.
Okay, next question. We find that instead of being two extremes, we meet more in the middle in terms of being under-equipped and very fearful around money. Also, my partner is vigilant about money, whereas I am avoidant because I believe that I don't have the ability to understand how money works. Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, so two people who align in the same way are averse. Let's just say averse. We're talking about avoidance, we're talking about money vigilance, and we're talking about averse. And the key to that is moving into innervating. In other words, when we talk about emotional dysregulation, someone can be underregulated, right? The dorsodepression of that. From a limbic perspective, it's the hype. They're not in sympathetic, they're in parasympathetic, which means they're shut down. And so there might be some issues around the fear and the history, family of origin, and the money beliefs that both of us are afraid. And what I often say to couples that align on one end of the spectrum together, maybe they both overspend and they're spending themselves into bankruptcy, to look at what can we do together as a couple so that, to the degree we're both comfortable in this way, to in small ways practice, it's a daily practice of living in gratitude and spending a little bit more just to pretend. In other words, we're taking baby steps to teach ourselves that we can tolerate and learn, kind of like exposure, learn that we can spend a little and that we can enjoy it, because there might be a deprivation aspect to this
Mm.
belief system together. And it also might be living in that lack of joy about life, that money just buys us the necessities, but that we don't enjoy life together and have fun. And so having fun is another way to innovate, to bring someone online, and to recognize that money might be an aspect of that, but it's also about living more in emotional abundance too, that helps balance.
Well, and I was thinking, I mean, there are courses where you can learn about, and I can't think of, you probably couldn't think of them right off the top of your head, but there are little, courses you can do to become more financially astute. How to manage your money, how to balance a budget, how to whatever, and I kind of wonder if it would be empowering to pick something where you're feeling under, what did you say?
under earning, or I mean,
Well, yeah, the under-equipped. That was
here's
the word.
one exercise that
Okay,
this couple
please.
can do. There's one takeaway that I love for couples to do. To put into a jar, if it really helps, a jar or a box or something where you literally put all the change that if you're spending cash, or you literally make a contribution every week. They make a little contribution, $5, $10, it doesn't matter, whatever amount of contribution, and that they decide at the end of 2 weeks or a month that that money is not detracting from anything that will pay the bills or anything that is meant for necessities. It's fun money, and that they can spend that money freely, whatever it is that they both decide to spend it on. It's kind of like free money, but it's money that comes guilt-free. And so in the sense it is free, it's guilt-free. And that's a great exercise to begin to play with that notion.
Oh, I love that idea. That's a very practical help. Okay, next question. My enmeshment with my mother and her decision to handle all things financial and not educate me in these matters has contributed to my ignorance around finances. So I am confident that, I mean, I hear this kind of regularly too, where parental involvement, shall we say, you know, they're still paying, you know, all the bills for someone who's technically an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a very common issue, the enmeshment. And in the book Coupleship Inc., we talk a lot about behaviors, and under the behavior of dependency and enabling. For every dependent, there's an enabler. So the enmeshment comes with that dynamic. There are two components to this question. There's the enmeshment aspect of the dynamic that the individual, as they become a grown adult, do not get to individuate, to become their own person. And so what has to happen is there has to be an emotional divorce. And there has to be a divorce and an individuation of independence out from under the belief that I, now child, a grown adult, won't be able to prosper on my own. Because there's a stunting, an emotional developmental stunting. So that's one very, very big part of this. Money is a symptom of that. So it might also show up in relationships, jobs, decisions about where I live for this individual. The enmeshment isn't just financial, it's psychological, it's emotional, and it's sexual. It's very much going to be sexual too, not because there's been sex, but because there's been a shunting and a lack of healthy psychosexual development. And the individual who has that financial dependency on a practical level might be very well served to go speak to a financial planner to get a sense about how to make their finances their own. There is financial literacy programs that are some phenomenal programs online to learn and educate, because knowledge is power. And to have that sense of knowledge and power means that I can stand confidently on my own 2 feet. So there's that aspect too. And then there's the decision of, I don't tell my enmeshed parent everything. That's none of their business now. So there has to be a distancing, that divorce that has to happen. I'm making decisions on my own. I love you, parent. And I'm going to make my own decisions, and I'm going to start to live on my own 2 feet. And the parent has to understand they're not going to be around forever. In a normal, healthy lifespan, the parent will die before the child, and they cripple the child's ability to become an independent adult. And so the independent adult is going to have that fear, obligation, and guilt of separating, but it's an important psychological separation.
And I hear you, and I know that you are right. And I also know that parental pull, like like that reasoning that you just said, is you're crippling your child, and you are not setting them up for, you know, once you're gone. It's like in their brokenness that doesn't show up. And so when you're saying the divorce, it is, but I just witnessed about a week and a half ago, someone was calling, and it was that situation, and the parental pull.
Oh, it's like gravitation. It's like the Earth's gravitation.
Yes.
Very, very painful.
Wanted to keep them at a low paying job and financially connected. And yeah, I mean, it was causing the marriage, you know, huge issues,
yes.
You know, and that's challenging.
it is painful for the child, now adult, and it is painful for the parent because they're losing the control and power, even though they believe they're coming from a place of best interest. It is not malintended most times. Nowhere is that playing out more now in popular culture than the HBO program Succession. For those that are watching it now, this will be, this webinar is being recorded, and one day it's not going to be on currently. The fourth season has just dropped. Now that is on a grand scale, financially grand scale, but those three children who are financially dependent upon their father's wealth, and the father makes sure that they know this all the time and cripples them at every point. It is a golden prison, and they have golden handcuffs. Now you'd say, well, I'd rather have golden handcuffs than have none at all. I don't know, speak to the person who's controlled financially in a family business, regardless of the price point. It's a very painful lack of independence.
Yeah. Well, and the financial courses you were talking about, that was what I was trying to refer to in the previous question too. And I do think, I'm going to educate myself or get education, can be empowering. It takes away some of that, oh, I can't do it. Right. I can do this. And all I have to do is take the first step of, signing up for the course. And I know that there's a lot of stuff that's online that is, free or low cost
and
too.
It's free. And that it builds the confidence, because that is what's so important, to have a sense of confidence, even when those around you may say, well, that's ridiculous. You're going to take free courses. That's kind of silly. No, it's not silly, because information is power. And information is knowledge, and knowledge is power. So
the next question, I'm a little confused on this one. Why would an addicted person ask if they should give their spouse access to his or her own money? So,
well, I can say briefly before we close that there are many instances, and not every relationship works the same way, and every situation is different. But where there has been financial infidelity, there has to be a financial disclosure, and a financial disclosure or transparency going forward. If the couple is to rebuild and not restart, but have a new relationship going forward, that there has to be a transparent openness with accounts and with finances. And that may be one of the reasons why a person who has created the infidelity and the betrayal to say, I am now being open and honest and transparent. This is the account. This is where the money is spent. And it goes a long way to building trust. And it's not about giving up control, or it's not about being controlled. It's not about asking for permission or giving permission. It's about two adults who are coming together to be transparent and honest and open.
That was lovely. Okay. Thank you. We are out of time, but thank you so much, Debra. This was great. Again, she did a two-part podcast with Dr. Rob. I don't know if it's dropped yet, but it will, on sex, love, and addiction. You can reach it from Seeking Integrity. I put information, links to both Battle of the Titans and The Coupleship Inc., from financial conflict to financial intimacy. So that those are two of her 3 books that are listed on Amazon. Check them out. And Debra, please come back.
I would love to. It's been a pleasure.
We'll plan again. This is so useful and such a point of conflict. So I love that you're finding a space for healing. So thank you, everybody. Bye.